From the Society of American Archivists, student chapter at the University of Alabama, this is Archives and Communities, a podcast highlighting community archiving initiatives and the people behind them.
For today's episode, we're local, here on the University of Alabama's campus at the Bryant Museum with Audiovisual Archivist and Specialist David Mize. We're discussing the museum's collections, what he does, and all of the ups and downs and in-betweens of audiovisual work. Starting his career in the back office of a closed chicken restaurant, David has essentially seen it all. Tell us about you. How long have you worked at the Bryant Museum, and how'd you get into this line of work anyway with audiovisual archives?
Well, I guess first things first, as far as being here, I started in 2006, so I am will be in my 17th year. It's been a journey for sure, but I started out in radio. I was a DJ in my small little town of Clanton, Alabama. And I actually got into that because my grandmother, after I graduated high school, and I was in my first year of college, and back then, unlike now, you actually could go to college before you knew what you wanted to do. I was still in the process of trying to figure that out, and my grandmother said, you ought to get in radio. You like to talk. And I thought, I'd never even thought about it. And so I went down to a little local radio station, and they were happened to be looking for somebody. And I cut a demo track, and they called me back the next day, and I started working in radio and absolutely loved it. It's still one of my favorite jobs I ever had. And I loved being in a medium like that, but I also knew I needed to be able to make a living. And so I was sitting in class one night at the local college there in Clanton. I spent my first 2 years kind of in a junior college before I went to the University of Montevallo. And I was sitting there, and a guy that I actually went to church with came in with a video camera and a tripod and all this neat equipment, and he made local advertisements there in Clanton on cable insertion. And I thought, well, that's neat. And so I told him when we got through if he mind if I talked to him a little bit, and we spent 4 hours on the back of his truck on the tailgate, him telling me all about editing and all about all this stuff, and I was just totally intrigued. He was editing in Centerville, Alabama. And so I went to Centerville and started editing and picked it up right away. And by the time I got to Montevallo and got into the mass comm program, I was almost teaching other students how to edit. It's just something that I enjoyed doing, the creativity. So that's how I got into the video aspect. And then I actually started out working at the university back in 96, which I know if you do your math, that's longer than 17 years, like I said, but that was my first stint at the university. I've had 2 stints, and I stayed about 3.5 years till right at 2000. And I left and went back to work for the guy I had originally started working for that taught me everything. Unfortunately, though, that company and the whole cable industry had a big shift, and everything got fibered in and did away with a lot of head-ends. And so basically he went into commercial production. He's at Channel 42 now doing their commercial production. And I came back to the university and was the AV person over at the Bryant Conference Center and did that for a year. And then the gentleman here that was doing the job I've got now, the AV job, he had been here like almost 20 years, and he decided he wanted to do something else. And I knew him, and I also knew the director at the time. So, I applied for the job, but he kind of left, and I kind of came in. So, wasn't a lot to it as far as I just kind of went from one job to another. So, then I've been here ever since.
What's your job like day to day? What are you kind of doing?
It's it can be kind of like a circus sometimes. I'll come in with the best intentions to do A, and I'll leave and never have gotten on A, but I've done C, D, and F. And I didn't even know C, D, and F were in the door, much less that I had to do them that day. Because, yes, I do the archiving here, but I also have to maintain the equipment that's in the exhibit hall. And I just did a new video for the exhibit hall this week. Also got to be able to, if someone calls and needs, if it's a documentary on like the SEC basketball that we've recently done for ESPN, they'll call and ask for a former player. And sometimes I don't have that former player's anything pulled for him. And so I have to go back and find the films or the video that it's on and compile kind of highlight clips. I usually make a ProRes file of them and then an MPEG-4 file that I send to them. And so there's a lot that goes into it that, people don't think about. There's a lot of times that people will call me about things that I wouldn't have even expected. I think it was a couple of years ago, Terrell Owens was on Dancing with the Stars. But Terrell Owens played for Tennessee Chattanooga. He didn't play for us. We played Tennessee Chattanooga back in the 90s when Terrell Owens was on the team. So they called me about getting footage of Terrell Owens for Dancing with the Stars. Biggest Loser, two former Alabama players, Roger Schultz and Trent Patterson, ended up getting footage for Roger and Trent for that show because they were teammates and on that show together. Roger almost won it. He came in second. So stuff like that. Just tell you how quickly times have changed. When I did the Biggest Loser stuff, nobody was taking stuff digital at that time. So I was still having to send out tapes. So I would have to get those clips together and then make a tape and send to them. And let me tell you something. When you had to get a tape out last minute, you talk about pull your hair out. So I'm glad that part's done. But back before it's digital, I used to have people come in and do stories, and they would bring their cameras in because they couldn't handle the same kind of material that I had, and they were using a different format, and we would have to feed their camera from my edit bay. So it's changed a lot since then. So one story I tell everybody about, I never know who's going to call me, is I got a phone call one day from NASA, guy in Huntsville, and said, "Hey, this is so-and-so and so-and-so from NASA." Well, he sounded just like a friend of mine. I thought a friend of mine pranking me, so I hung up the phone. I said, "I ain't got time for this." About 5 seconds later, the guy calls back. He says, No, before you hang up, I'm really so-and-so and so-and-so from NASA. Well, what would they want from me? Well, what they wanted from me is they were in the final stages of the last shuttle missions. And they were doing a video of fourth quarter comebacks to tell their people that were working on this, hey, just because we're in the fourth quarter doesn't mean, we don't try. We try even harder. So, that was a unique experience to provide that for them. Even dealt with the strategic communications here on campus. They were doing something with presidents that had been on campus before. And they had a whole bunch of three-quarter tapes when President Reagan was here. So I digitized that for them because they couldn't do it. And that's one of the things with that's really kind of been neat in the last couple of years is I'm getting a lot of people that come in that have nothing to do with sports. But I'm kind of the only person around here that has the equipment.
We could all easily sound like little tinfoil conspiracy theorists when we get down like the rabbit hole of talking about like digital versus analog versus our physical stuff versus cloud storage and all of that. But realistically, that is stuff like, especially audiovisual archivists and people that are working with media and things like that, you have to think about that. You have to foresee the next 5, 10, 15 years of how this stuff is even not only going to be accessible, but just exist anyway.
I know you've mentioned me as an archivist. I don't really consider myself that. I consider myself more of a video. I'm a video editor that started making videos in the back of an old chicken restaurant. That's where I started out. But because I think I started out that way, and I'm not really an archivist when it comes to my education, I see not only have I had issues back and forth with some other archivists, video archivists, on how they think things should be done, but I've seen that come to a head just between archivists. And that's one thing that I would say for the next generation of archivists is we need to come up with some solutions that are agreed upon across the board. Kodaks and storage solutions and things of that nature. There are a lot of people out there that know their stuff, but unfortunately, a lot of them are with companies trying to sell you a product. And you run into people that are just they're trying to do it their way because that's how they make their money. And that's aggravating too, because I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this because I've been doing it long enough that a lot of this stuff is my baby, and I want to see it be around for other generations. And so I'm not looking to shortcut it. We're working right now with a company, or hopefully here, Catapult. Great company. I've been working with them for years because they're also part of UA Athletics Licensing and the SEC. They basically are the middleman when somebody calls and wants a clip and they're doing a documentary. I call or email these people and they talk to them about how much it's going to cost for the clips. I send the clips to Catapult. Catapult basically puts it in their system and puts a watermark on it and gives them some reels to look at, and they choose I want from this time code to this time code to use in my documentary. And then Catapult gets a little bit, and the SEC gets a little bit, University of Alabama Athletics gets a little bit, and I get a pat on my back. But at the same time, we're using them. They're not archivists.
Before we get into more detail, I guess, about Catapult and that project, you have a very unique perspective when it comes to the archives and being an archivist, because your background, you did start out on that side of things, the actual broadcasting, the actual people side. And this is how it's supposed to look. This is how it's supposed to be. This is the proper way, and not in that like just archivist mentality of save it, save it, save it. And so I can see where you probably clash with some people, but I think that's what's benefited this a lot, though, and the Bryant Museum having you here is you have the ability to think of both sides of the party. The people who are working in media and they're on the front line of that, and then the people who are on the back end, archivists who are trying to save it and preserve it, and you have both of those kind of melded together.
Well, it's funny you say that, and I appreciate you saying that, but you helped me bring up a story when you talk about people and coming from a people's perspective. I, being in commercials, first of all, you wanted to get people's attention. You wanted to come across people's, come across to people like you're one of them. And when I started out working for Mr. Capps, Sean Capps in Clanton, when he finally got his equipment, he had this nice edit bay. He had everything you could dream of at that time in the mid 80s. Again, not anything digital. We were editing linear at that time, tape to tape. And he had a speaker system. He had 2 big speakers on the wall. And boy, it sounded great when we mixed the audio and everything. But the way things worked back then, all your audio went to one channel, channel 2. And your channel 1 audio was for your tones that made the player, the U-matic player, fire off and stop. So you didn't put your audio on channel 1. But one of the things Sean did, I'll never forget this, he took his 3/4 master that he made this commercial on, and he made a VHS copy. And then he took his VHS copy and he rolled out this 19-inch television, turned it on, had a little speaker with the channels back then, and he played that VHS of that commercial. And I said, why do you play it right there? He said, because this is how people are going to hear it. And he said, if they can't make out from this one speaker, because that's all really people had, if they can't make it out from this one speaker, then we haven't done our job. So I'm one of the few people that still edit with a TV. I still do it because guess what? That TV right there is the same kind of TV I got out in the exhibit hall. So that's always something that stuck with me is when you do things in dealing with people, that you make sure you're dealing with people on their level, right? Because we can save this 6 ways from Sunday, but if it doesn't look like it's supposed to, and if it doesn't sound like it's supposed to, we haven't saved it the right way. But it's a fine line to balance. It really is.
So you mentioned doing a digitization project with Catapult. What does that entail, and what's that project about, and it's kind of the end goal and intentions there?
Well, that is a project that actually started a couple of years ago when we moved from. Actually, it started when we were still with continuing studies. They were looking to start digitizing some of our collection, our video collection, and we went with a couple of different companies as far as estimates and what that would cost. And once the price got up to $3 and $4 million, it's kind of like everybody's kind of changed the subject on me, or we'll get back to you on that. So when we went to arts and sciences, they were interested in it too, and at the same time, the kind of worked out that the president of the university came by one day, just kind of dropped in, and then Mrs. Saban dropped in, and I guess that kind of got the wheels in motion a little more than what David Mize can get the wheels in motion going, and which makes sense. And so, long story short, the provost has given us a little bit of money. I won't say a little bit of money. It's a good amount, but it's not near what we'll need to do the whole. It's a good starting point. I'm very glad to have it, but it also kind of puts us in a situation of, especially for me, is okay. I'm with a limited budget here. What goes out and what doesn't? So we've been in the process of right now kind of prioritizing. We're making space to prioritize what needs to go out, and also we've made space for when it comes back, so that it's not integrated with, we're not sitting there looking at our whole collection going, okay, what did we send out? What came back? What came back is now in this area. So that's what we're doing now, along with, I have you and Kaylee and Aaron.
Shout out Sliffs.
Yeah. And also my other student that I've had for a couple of years, Carly. And we are digitizing some things that I don't necessarily think we need to spend that money to do, but needs to be done. Yeah, we're looking forward to the Catapult thing. In some ways I'm a little terrified of it, to be honest with you, just for the fact of it's going to be a lot of work.
You're also working in pretty much a special collection too. I mean, it's pretty specialized, niche little archive, dealing, with one little thing, the university sports.
Right.
And most of it seems is football and stuff. So,
but that is a good point.
That's got its other layer to it.
And that we probably didn't bring up is because a lot of people do think it's just football, but it's not. It's basically all the Olympic sports too: swimming, tennis, gymnastics. Gosh, we got a ton of gymnastics, men's basketball and women's basketball and all sorts of stuff. Matter of fact, I've got a film that's got some baseball and some track on it from 1935. Yeah.
And the first Alabama Homecoming film, got that one?
Well, it's not the first homecoming film, but it's the first film we have
in color.
In color.
Yeah.
It's a 1939 film that was brought to me by a lady whose grandfather was a doctor here in Tuscaloosa. And being a doctor, even back then, had money, and he was able to actually have color film. And so it's 1939, Alabama versus Mississippi State, 8mm. Couldn't do it here. I had to send it off at that time. I can do it now, but I couldn't at that point. And we got it back, and I sat there with my mouth wide open because it was beautiful. For 8mm, it's just fantastic. And, it's color, and it's got the Mississippi State band. It's got the $1 Million band. It's got a great shot of a male cheerleader with Bama on the front of his sweater. It's got Frank Thomas walking out onto the Denny Field at the time, because it wasn't Bryant Denny, it was just Denny Field. And there's a couple of things about it. One of them is just like now here at the university at homecoming, that Sorority Row does all this decorating. I'm watching this with students, and they have decorated Sorority Row with the Tin Man and the Lion and the whole Wizard of Oz. And my students at the time go, "Oh man, the Wizard of Oz, that was a classic back then." And I said, "No,
that's when it came out."
You don't understand. That's when it came out, and they couldn't believe that. And so It just, it was funny when they said that, and I said no, my eyes just got huge. No, it came out that year.
Oh
That's
my
what
God.
makes it so great. And then the other thing is the $1 Million Band gets out there on the field, and at that time, Denny Stadium, the ends were open, so it had, the bleacher seats on one side, seats on the other, but it wasn't anything like it is now. So it was open on both sides. Well, at that time it was a university kind of in the middle of a neighborhood. And so they're out there marching, and all of a sudden here come these dogs jumping on them, wanting to play. And so the drum major's out there trying to do his thing, and this dog's jumping on him, wagging his tail. And then here comes another dog. And it's just funny to see that, and to see how different things are now, because Lord mercy, could you imagine a dog getting out there now? I mean, shoot, how's he going to get it in there? I mean,
Yeah.
through all the layers of security now, but that was just, such different times and everything. But those are the type of things that you'll get in from time to time. It wasn't as good, but I had a gentleman bring me a film that his dad took in the stands when Joe Namath was here.
Oh, nice.
And you just never know. I've had people bring me 16 millimeter film in that I don't know how they got it, but it's, I had a gentleman bring me in a Rose Bowl film from, oh gosh, I think we went Rose Bowl in '46, and it's like, it's been up in my attic. My grandpa had it. You get that all the time. So being able to have some of these older formats kind of brings the history to us too.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, Strategic Communications at the university was going to put some things together of history of some big time people that had come to the university, and one of them was Ronald Reagan.
Wow.
He came and spoke when he was president over at Coleman. But what they had was on 3/4. They couldn't play it. So they get talking, who can play this, and somebody says, well, I think David Mize over at the museum can play it. So the guy from over there calls me and says, hey, can you play this? I said, bring it on. And so I digitized it for them.
Yeah.
And they were, tickled because they had it.
Archives like this, what matters isn't just those like important things that you're going to make money off of and are going to go into these like super big corporate media production like documentaries and things like that. It's all of it.
I think the thing that I really enjoy the most is when a former player brings his son in, or his grandson, or his great-grandson, and they're able to come in and see footage of the granddad play, or maybe it's even a grandson or great-grandson, and the person has passed away, and they've never seen them play.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can find it, and it really means a lot to them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that people probably really don't get, is how much this means to the former players. It's a way for them to connect with their time here. And of course, a lot of Coach Bryant's former players, it means the world to them, because they're able to come in and hear Coach Bryant and relive those memories.
Do you have anything else you think you want to add or think is worth mentioning, and advice you think for people that want to get into this kind of work?
Well, I hope other people do get into this type of work, that there's always somebody that's going to be around to be able to play a long lost tape that somebody's found that nobody else can play. I think that's going to be something that is really going to be needed as we even go farther along. Half the equipment I got now is from television stations that have went totally tapeless, and then guess what happens? They end up calling me to dub a tape that they found, because they still got their tape. It blows my mind. It can be an uphill climb, but hopefully people will get enthusiastic about it, and like yourself, and we can have more people involved in it and keep this type of thing going. There's always going to be a film or a tape out there somewhere. And the only thing I'll tell like I said at the beginning, it was my grandmother really that got me started. Listen to your parents, listen to your grandparents, those type of people, and just stop and listen as much as you can to anybody that knows about this stuff and is willing to share. There's a lot of people out there that would love to share their experience and their knowledge, and it will mean the world to you if you're getting into something like this, because the more you know, the more you can help others and get stuff like this off the ground.
If you'd like to learn more about the Bryant Museum, visit or see the exhibit or collections they have to offer, you can contact the Bryant Museum at info@bryantmuseum.com or by calling 205-348-4668. If you'd like to make an appointment with David for the archives or to get assistance with audiovisual assets, you can reach him at dmize, M-I-Z-E, @ua.edu. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and please do consider visiting the Bryant Museum and supporting their collections.
This was an episode of Archives and Communities, the official podcast of the SAA student chapter at the University of Alabama. Music by ScanGlobe and Scott Holmes. Opinions expressed in this podcast are not reflective of any particular institution. Thank you for listening, and join us again next time.